Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, your definitive leadership podcast for an opportunity to listen in, learn, and grow from successful people in business. We listen and learn from successes. We learn sometimes from failures. We have very candid conversations with people from all different verticals. And today I have an absolutely amazing guest with me, Brandy Burch. First off, she has succeeded as a single parent from a non-traditional background, and she's become the I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word, trailblazing founder and CEO of benefitbay. She is a trailblazer. She is a leader. She's a manager. They pioneer employee benefits and health insurance. She's been 20 years in finance and tech and human capital. She engages with people. She is an awesome leader. She is an awesome woman, and I'm excited to have her on the show today. Brandy Burch, welcome to the Leadership Toolkit. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. So if you would take just a few minutes, and we started talking beforehand, and if you would share a bit of what is your background? What's your background in business? How did you get into, leadership and management, entrepreneurship? I know you have a really colorful background, and I'm excited to hear more, and I'm excited for our audience to hear more.
Yeah, I started out as an accountant, and I took a non-traditional path in accounting. I had already had a child, and so I went to a small business and started in that small business and was able to do several different roles and learned that I liked lots of things. So I stayed industry kind of open-minded and did several roles for small businesses in Kansas City that were more from that 100 to 200 employee size. As my career progressed, I went back to school and got my master's degree, got my master's in finance, and then moved on to more global sized organizations and roles that were more in the controller or finance role. I then went to visit KC as a publicly facing pseudo-public entity in a VP of finance role, and just really learned that I like to solve complex problems, various problems in different industries, and learn new things. And that was important to me. Finally landed at a software company in San Francisco pre-COVID, and they had a remote role as a single mom, and I was really excited about that and having a better work-life balance. And that's what led me to the ultimate result of benefitbay. Benefits have always been a thing at every one of those companies, and for retention, something that's a point of frustration for employees. And that's what's led me here.
Great. Well, and I think one of the things is benefits it's tough to navigate for employees. It's tough to navigate for employers. I know with employers that I've worked with, there's at least my perception, I could be wrong in this, but there's sort of a mystique behind it, right? You have all of these different options, all of these different pieces and so forth. And so when did you start benefitbay, forgive me?
In April of 2021.
Okay. And so you're leading it, you're the CEO. I know we talked a little bit beforehand. You said you have some remote workers. What is your process to, like, say you're engaging with a company, and I think this is important for leaders and managers. You start engaging with a company. What is your process to look at their existing benefits plans? What's your process to look at the way that they do things? Because we were even talking before, lots of times smaller businesses don't have sort of SOPs, standard operating procedures and so forth, and ways that they do things. And do you work with companies of all sizes, or are you focused more on that, small to medium sized business?
Yeah, we work with companies of all sizes. We're starting to see those larger companies consider what we do. And what we do is founded around personal choice with employee benefit dollars. And it is defined contribution. So that's really complex. Legislation passed during the first Trump administration called ICHRA, Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangements. Mm-hmm. And that is where our technology is really sat, is making sure that individual choice is right for an employer population, ensuring that individual choice or IFP plans or products are not more expensive than what self-insurance may look like or group insurance for that group. So it's an evaluation and analytical tool that keeps that employer in a compliant state, but tells them if this is the thing they should do for their employees. Because like you said, benefits are complex. The same shoe doesn't fit everyone. And those employee populations are in diverse industries. They're seated all over the US. They could even be global. They could range in ages from, early 20s to working into their 70s. And so all of those things have to be considered. We really work with the consultant, the broker consultant, and have a tool set to facilitate their ability to provide and add value at the table. And we step in as that partner for them in this new industry and solve all the complexities around the technology pieces, because anytime something's new, the carriers move very slow. They're a bit of a cruise ship, so it takes them a while. So we stand in that gap that isn't solved yet.
Gotcha. So there's a couple things, because you've talked about a few different acronyms, and I'd like you to define them just for the audience, because I think it's one of those things. I know a few of them, but one of the things you brought up was ICHRA, and it's ICHRA. What is
Yep.
ICHRA? Can you define that and so forth?
Yeah, it's individual coverage, health reimbursement arrangement. It allows employers to give a defined bucket of dollars to that employee to access, because those are their benefit dollars. And then they can decide which carrier, which type of product is best for their family, instead of the employer deciding. And then the employer can set that budget, right? So they know how much that employee is going to cost them at that zip code, at that age, or they can set that defined contribution, and they can leave it for a couple of years rather than every year getting a 20% increase in this mystery over why, or being concerned that someone has a health outcome and, oh no, this is probably going to affect our bottom line. And I just think that that's the part of benefits that really stink, is the human empathy part, and what it does to us if anyone has a health outcome inside of an employer population.
And what is, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think the most important part, like it said, you'd worked in human capital, like the humans are emotional creatures. And especially, I think we get more emotional if we don't understand something. And you're in an industry that's there's lots of things to define and understand. What is defined contribution? You brought that up also when you were saying.
Yeah. So in defined contribution, it is, if I'm looking at an employer population, I have certain sets of rules with ICHRAs or ICHRAs that the ratios can't be more than 3-to-1 from the highest compensated to the lowest compensated, right? Of contribution, things need to be fair and equitable. It needs to be meeting affordability guidelines for a contribution to each employee. And so those employers have to look at all of those regulations and ensure that the amount they're giving somebody meets those definitions of compliance. And then that individual knows how much they're going to get if they're an employee plus a spouse, or they have 3 children, they're getting a set dollar amount per each of those hierarchies.
And so that's that's primarily all those things that you do with benefitbay. And then you commented, you said you work with a broker. So you're working with multiple different insurance brokers from different industries.
Yeah, we're working with the national agencies. We're working with the small regional broker. We're working with the individual broker. We're working with any health and life consultants that are out servicing employers, and they're doing so in the best interest of that employer. They're arming themselves with a tool set to evaluate ICHRA at every table, so that they're bringing it to that conversation, whether it's right or not, and they're letting their employer build that trust with them to know that they've looked at it, because it's something new. We're all trying to solve this complex benefits affordability problem. And if a broker's not looking at it for an employer, I would ask why, because they should be looking at it every time.
So from a leadership standpoint, since you're sort of leading and guiding those brokers to the right direction for the business, is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say when you're going in, and I think this is important for all people to know, when you have somebody, especially when we're talking about benefits and items like this that can be difficult, one, for employers to understand, employees to understand, and so forth, what are some of the top questions that an employer should be asking their broker, or maybe that they should be coming back to you to ask, to say, well, what when it comes to benefits, what are some of the top questions that you hear that come back from management and from businesses when searching for plans?
I think businesses should be asking their broker, have you left any stone unturned? Have you quoted what individual coverage would look like for our population? Have you quoted what self-insurance would look like for our population? What did you take to RFP? Did you take the same exact structure as we have last year and just go for the renewal quote? Did you just go to 3 competitive carriers but not look at any alternative structure for our organization? What creative, evaluations or consultative approaches have you taken for our renewal conversation? And actually, they should ask themselves, is their broker checking in? Their broker should know what their claims are looking like within their population. And if they're currently on self-insurance or they're currently on a level funded plan, they're going to know how that group is running from a claims or losses standpoint. So they should be well prepared throughout those quarterly updates of, listen, unfortunately, you have some high claims usage this year. Let's look at some alternative solutions so that you're not just left holding a 30% increase and not enough time to make a plan, right? So I think that's true. I think they should also be asking their broker for the right partners to interview when they are looking for something like ICHRA. And there are 26 technology providers in this space. It's getting very crowded. There are a lot of dollars being thrown at, startups that are just throwing together something and turning it on. And their employers need to be well stewarded because this is compliance and it's employees' health insurance. So I think they need to be also asking their broker, what are you doing to make sure we have the right partner at the table if we make that choice? Because their consultant should be evaluating the right bin admin tool set for them, the right FSA partner, right? Those pieces to keep them within that compliance reign and doing that hard work on their behalf.
Gotcha. So do you ever have employers engage directly with you, or is it primarily through consultants?
They come to us direct all the time. We just ask to speak with their broker. We are, that's our go-to-market differentiator, is we're 100% through the broker channel. We're here to be that trusted partner that helps them remain with their value point at the table. Because at any point, individual plans could shift and be less competitive for that employer. And they need a broker partner at the table who's able to evaluate all the various channels for health insurance improvement, right? And we feel like as an ICHRA provider, we're unpopular in our statement here. We don't feel like individual choice fits everywhere because some of the markets don't have a lot of carrier options, don't have a lot of plans available, maybe have very limited network, could be a traveling construction worker who needs a PPO product, and most of their employees are seated there. So there's various networks and various product market areas that are more difficult for ICHRA to be a positive shift for than others. But we're seeing in almost 80% of the cases, it's a win. And so those 20% outliers, though, we don't want to put individual choice into an employer population and affect change if it's not positive. If you're going to move to ICHRA, at best reduced cost, improve choice, right? And improve outcome. If it's not going to do those things, then I, as an employer, should not make that decision and my broker shouldn't recommend it to me. So that's why we work through the broker consultant.
Gotcha. So what would you advise somebody that is leading a company, and you're probably engaging with a lot of HR departments, office managers, controllers, that sort of deal. Yeah. What would you advise them to ask? What are the pitfalls to see? And we're sitting here very candidly. And if you said, hey, listen, if you asked your broker this, and this, because I like the things I said, hey, what should they be looking for to move forward? You said, have you left anything unturned? Yep. Is the broker checking in? I think that's really, really valuable. I mean, and I know that would come on the other side too. If the broker's not checking in, might be the wrong broker. If they are checking in, might be the right broker, right? So that could fall on both sides of what I'm going to ask. And then you asked about, do they have the right partners to interview and engage with? What are the pitfalls? How will I know, or are there some questions that I can ask the broker that would be a red flag? If I said again, I'm running my business or I'm in one of those key positions in a business and I'm seeking the right broker, what are some things that I would ask and you'd go, oh no, that's a red flag?
Yeah. I mean, a red flag would be if a broker tries to talk them out of looking at any other solutions. That's a red flag. A red flag for bin admin or technology tool sets is that they wouldn't be open and transparent with sharing, security audits, any type of audit report, references to clients that are like size industry and sizes. I think the pitfalls for our industry are massive. If you want me to get into that,
the list is long. Yeah,
the
no,
list is long.
absolutely.
I think often people don't care about the individuals that they're servicing, and there has to be a service component when it comes to benefits, right? You have individual employees who use their benefits maybe once, twice a year, maybe 3 times. When they go to use them, sometimes it's an emergency. Maybe they've misplaced a card. Maybe something has happened, right? So I think lack of service at your brokerage firm or your whoever's administrating those benefits is a huge red flag to me. If you do not have customer facing licensed support people in any of those scenarios. I think with ICHRA, it's a new technology. So a lot of people have stood up a bit of what's needed to service it, but they haven't stood up all of the pieces. And so the individuals are being harmed in that equation. So equate for me that is security. So is the organization secure? Because you're going to have people's payment mechanisms, their social security numbers, their health outcomes, and you're going to have that inside a brand new technology, right? How stable is that? You want to ensure that they have, long tenured team members to service you. They don't have high turnover. You want to ensure that they can support your employee members and they will do so appropriately, and that they care about your employees as much as you do, because retention is really hard today for talent, and all of those things should be important. So that's why you need a broker who's already got a partner. They've vetted them, they've worked with them, they know who's great in a specific industry, and it doesn't have to be ICHRA. But I think that those are some red flags if someone hasn't looked at them. I also encourage employers to make their own decisions too. Their broker can bring a preferred partner. You never know if that broker is getting compensated by that partner in some way for those referrals, and they may not be the best in class in that industry. So I encourage them, if they've decided, that they also go ahead and take their own demos to more than one party. See how those TPA or sales reps are working with them. Do they demonstrate integrity? How are they behaving? Do they do the follow-up? If they can't follow up in the sales cycle, they're likely not going to follow up when it's a support item. And do they answer all of your questions and make you feel well stewarded? Is there cultural alignment to your logo? I think some companies are different than other companies. Like our phone numbers in our signature, and we're on camera, and you're going to know how to contact us. But a lot of technology companies you can't find a human. You got to go through some generic support. To get to someone is very difficult. So I think all of those things are red flags. So just like your broker following up with you, what does that partner that they've secured look like? And make sure you just trust but verify. I like to say trust but verify. You can trust business relationships you've built in the market, but just verify for yourself as well that that's the best out there.
I love all that. Brandy, I want to break this out a little bit, because it's so fun. I learn so much as I'm sitting having these conversations, and obviously you're so passionate about your industry. I look at the broader picture too, because when I'm talking about the leadership toolkit as a whole, one thing to consider, like the question is simply like, okay, well, hey, what are the red flags to look out for? And you're focused in your industry. I think though, looking across industry, like you brought up, you said, don't have somebody talk you out of other solutions. If I'm leading a company, if I'm in a key, if I'm in a C-suite position, or I'm in a key position of the company, you were saying earlier, when we're in those, 100 to 200 people, small to mid-sized businesses and so forth, lots of people, you may wear lots of different hats, but there are those key people at the top in the organization. And, looking at vendors in general in this way, I think is valuable. I mean, I think you bring a lot of value to say, okay, you're looking at it from an insurance and a brokerage standpoint. But when we look at any vendors, you closed with trust but verify. I think that's so important for every vendor that you do business with. It's easy to fall into the trap of, in business, we trust somebody, and so then we stop verifying. We allow the friendship to over influence the actual business relationship, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, when you're talking about things like not sharing information, you said, lack of service and customer facing people. I think that's huge in any industry. And especially right now, it's so easy, technology and social media, all these things that we've sort of become conditioned to, right? And so then it's accepted. That's just what we do. BS. That's not what we do. Like, I think you bring a really solid point on the human element. And certainly in an industry that requires the human element in insurance and benefits, but that should be for everywhere,
Yeah.
so for those of you watching or listening, take note of that. And I always think about, okay, where's the bigger picture here too? One of the
Yeah.
big things, and you didn't say this in these exact words, but I'm gonna put these words to it. You said, essentially, people can't use a cookie cutter approach.
No.
You said sometimes this doesn't work for this business. Sometimes it does work for this business. And so often when we're trying to engage with somebody, there's so many different facets to that. Because I'm trying to engage with a company and they say, well, this is our approach for everybody. Or vice versa, as a leader, if you're trying to engage with staff, well, this is how I deal with everybody. No, it's not. You can't have a cookie cutter approach in business in general. When we're talking employee benefits, when we're talking dealing with vendors, when we're talking dealing with followers or staff or whatever, that titled subsection of people is, right?
Yeah.
You can't have that. And then two things that really stood out to me, you brought up and you said, people got to have integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And this is huge. As I mentioned beforehand, my background's the auto industry. But if they're not going to follow up with you when you're trying to sell you a product, they're not going to follow up with you once you have purchased the product. They've already got
Right.
your money. And you're chuckling about it too. But it's like, it's one of those things where so often in business, and it's guys and gals, it's the same thing in leadership, right? We want so badly something for somebody. And so we
Yeah.
put that on them. Oh, well, no, it's just this one time. Or we start to inject and make excuses. And I've said this on past shows. If you care more than the individual, if you care more than the business that you're going to do business with, that relationship will never fly. It will never
Mm-mm.
work.
No.
So I love all of those pieces that you shared there. I want to step back in time for you for a minute. One of the things that you talked about, you said, I started out in accounting and small and mid-sized business. And this is just how my brain works. Like, I probably should ask these at the beginning, but this is where we are. So,
Yeah.
and then you said you got your master's, you moved into more like comptroller positions and so forth. Can you recall who were the people that had influence? Like, were you content in the accounting world, or was it like, hey, I always wanted more? And so what were you doing for yourself? And so for anybody looking at people that are in business, and maybe you're not in a leadership role, maybe you're sales and you're wanting to move into the next level of sales, being a closer, or depending on the industry, maybe you're in marketing and you want to move into marketing management and so forth. So in Brandy's case, you were in accounting. Was it something that you were content and somebody was pulling you along, or were you always like, hey, I want to go to this next level? What was driving you?
To be honest, my kids. So my divorce was pivotal in me having a desire to have a higher level position to provide for them. I think I was pretty comfortable where I was in my roles, but once the financial outcome was 100% relying on myself, I was trying to step to that next level, and I couldn't do so without MBA or CPA. So that was the driver for me to go back to school. Actually went back to get my MBA right after my divorce. And that was so that I could step from controller to VP of finance, or controller to CFO. Once I got to the C-suite or equivalent C-suite, I got to work with those other colleagues who were in those marketing roles, or were in partnership roles, or we were collaborating on the leadership decisions of the business. That's when I learned that I had a real knack for the people. And that's where the HR side of my background started to come into play. I went out and got my HR certifications. I started to learn more from there. When I think about a leader who made a difference for me, it was a director that I worked with at a company. So she was at that same company. I was a VP of finance. She provided direct feedback. She was not intimidated to provide feedback to people who were either cross-departmental or who were a level higher. She wanted to get the best out of all of the humans she worked with. And that was the first pivotal change for me in providing direct feedback, or actually being open to cross-team collaboration feedback, or helping people be better and not feeling like I was stepping out of my lane.
Love that. So when you were saying that she, was the first person that really influenced direct feedback for you, can you remember, and she was cross-departmental for you, or was she said, you said she was
Yeah,
a director. So was she in like your
she was
charge, or was
director
she?
of partnership and events, actually. At the time, she's now a chief philanthropy officer at United Way. So she's really
Okay.
gone up with her career. And I was the VP of finance.
Gotcha.
She would see where I would take on and I had tended to take on other leaders' accountability as this finance CFO, right? They're in charge of their budget. I'm not in charge of them going over or under budget. We've defined the budget the year before, right? And I would take on trying to solve the problem that they were over budget, right? And really that was their departmental budget. And she would call me out on those behaviors. And then there were times where you could tell I wasn't aligned with a leadership conversation or some type of directive. And rather than speak out, I would change my body language. And she would tell me, you can read you like a book, like just either say what you have to say or don't do that, right? Because what you're doing isn't healthy. And I think that took a lot of courage for her, but also I respected it immensely because I traditionally worked for older gentlemen. Probably they may not have ever even felt comfortable giving direct feedback to a female who was a direct report. I'm not sure. Or often I knew how to do more things than they did because they hadn't kept up with the technology or how the systems worked. And so I don't know that they would have even known to provide some of it. So that was important to me. I think it was important to realize that other people can want the best for you and just to help you improve. I was providing public outward-facing content for the first time on a financial basis at an organization that could have the news at the board meeting, right? So a 30-person board and lots of attendees and sometimes the news. And she helped coach, allow me to practice those types of things. So I think just having a colleague there that cared about your best interest. And then I'd say the other person, I really liked Gary Vee, early Gary Vee, before he was popular, before anyone knew who Gary Vaynerchuk was. Following him when he was, doing the whole wine side before he got as popular, right? And I liked his style because it was authentic, and authenticity is really big for me. I like transparency, and I like how he cares about humans, but he also isn't too politically correct. So I think a lot of I also like Brene Brown, but a lot of the leadership people out there, they're so politically correct, and leadership it's messy. Things are all over the place, right? And sometimes you may have a leader or a team member get a little heated, show a little passion, drop a F-bomb, like we mentioned, and things happen. It doesn't mean that individual doesn't immensely care about the role they're in or care about the team they're with. Or if we can't demonstrate some of those things when it happens, then we're all just going to be robots at work. And so he was one of my early favorites to listen to his I think he was just vulnerable, and not too many people were yet back when he was early Gary.
And he was just early Gary was just like you, was a trailblazer, right? He was just doing it. You turn on the camera and you go and you figure it out. And
he was just hustling hard, and he had dreams, and he didn't care what people thought. I loved that.
I think, and so here's some things that I pulled out of that, because, and I'll ask you what other qualities you think are valuable, but as far as leadership, and we were talking about, okay, hey, when you were transitioning to these roles, who made an impact, what made an impact, things that you brought up. And I always repeat this one so that I think it's important. If you're listening to a podcast, either bookmark stuff or write it down. That's how you gain value out of things like this.
Yeah.
You said people that give direct feedback. Like you said, giving direct feedback, especially as a leader right now with all the regulations and HR BS that's out there in the world, that can be hard. And I also am from the old school. You could ask the people that still work for me. I really don't give two shits. If it's the right thing, this is what needs to be said, and that's what we're going to say. And it's not out of malice. It's not out of discontent. It's because it needs to be said, and hopefully you need to hear it, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of value in that. You said that she coached you. I
Yeah.
think that's something that is very important. What's the difference between when you're saying, and let me get through these others, and I want to come back to that statement, because you said, hey,
Mhm.
she really coached me, she did this. You talked about transparency and authenticity. I think people being real, people can tell there's a difference of if you're absolutely real or if you're trying to baffle people with BS.
Yeah.
And so let me a couple of things. One, before we get too far and before I ask this question, because I can see us going down this road. For the folks listening to the podcast, if you want to check out and you're interested, because we talked a lot about benefits and health insurance and navigating that tangled web of just whatever it is out there. If you're interested, you can have either yourself or have your broker check out benefitbay.com. It's benefitbay.com. Yeah, it looked funny
Yeah.
for me for a second. I was like, I hope I got that spelled right.
That's right.
And certainly also you can email Brandy if you wanted to connect one-on-one, brandy.burch@benefitbay.com. And then if you want a more personal connection, see what she's about on social, I did put the LinkedIn link there. It's linkedin.com/n/Brandy-Burch. And then it's followed by some numbers. It's -243-89536. But probably if you just look up Brandy Burch, she showed right up for me when we were connecting. So that's easy enough too. But that way it's got the link on the screen. So yeah, absolutely. And I'll make sure and include that in the show notes too, for anybody that may be interested to connect more. I love the fact that you brought up early Gary Vee, and I still like Gary Vee. I have connections being in the auto industry, and I have a friend that's a marketer that worked directly for Gary in the early days and so forth. And I
Mhm.
agree, the authenticity and the transparency, and there's a lot to be said about leadership, and just you go and figure it the F out, right? You
Yeah.
just go. Because sometimes and I love the fact, Brandy, that you said leadership is messy. We try and have this perfectly square box, and it's like we always say, oh, think outside the box.
Yeah.
But everybody tries to stay in there because we got to stay quote unquote professional. Well, who
Yeah.
defines professional, right? I
Right.
mean, just be real with people. So what is the difference? Because one of the key things, and I think this is super valuable for people to hear, as leaders, it is important that we are also coaches to our
Yeah.
people. What for you defines somebody that is a coach versus, just a manager or a director? I know you said she was a director, but then
Yeah.
you also said, hey, she was much more than that. So can you help define that for folks?
Yeah. I think coaches are trying to get the best out of a team and they're trying to get to the peak performance, right? So if you think about a coach of any team that, any sport that everyone likes, you're trying to get the best out of those individuals and get them to work effectively as a team. And a coach is going to provide that direct feedback, but also try to be working towards the ultimate result, right? So keeping those things in mind in whatever the scenario is. Also, coaches build confidence in players, right? And so how do you give confidence to a player? Is you get them in the game, right? You get them exposure, you get them in high pressure situations, you get them to believe they can do things that they've never done before, right? You start to tear down those insecurities or those, what we say, like people have imposter syndrome in their career life. That's, different than on the court. On the court, maybe they're sweating at the free throw line because their percentage is low. But really it is exposure. It is, for me, that definition in that coach space is getting more out of people than they believe they're even capable of and showing them great things in themselves that they didn't know they had, but also, some of their weaknesses, helping to coach those up to be into a better place so that they're not harming their ability to be successful in the future. So I think it's kind of a combination. I look at it as a team, and we're only as good as, the attitude of every member of that team. So even if someone's on the bench and it's not yet their turn to shine, they have to have the positive impact towards the team that is going to yield to the successful outcome. And we're all going to fail sometimes, and we're going to win sometimes, and it's not going to be all the time. But I think defining that and knowing that you're all on that same team and they feel it is how they feel they have a coach leader. And I think even if somebody was below you, having a coach that does it appropriately and it's not in a public setting where they're correcting you and making you feel humiliated or called out inappropriately. The way that Jessica is her name did those things with me were one-on-one, and it was more, hey, let me tell you something. I can read you like a book, and what your desired outcome is and what's happening are two different things, So
Sure.
I think being clear and outlining it to what are the negative implications of how I'm doing it, what are the positives if I change it, helped me to be more receptive to the feedback.
I think that's really valuable input too, and valuable insight, that there's a time and a place for public discussion when you're coaching the team. And there's a time and a place so she wasn't sitting across the room going, hey, Brandy, I can see the way, lift your shoulders up, girl. Right?
Yeah, she wasn't doing that. No.
So one of the things too, when you said coaches build confidence and they give them an opportunity, they give people an opportunity to play. How do you, for you, because I can see you're a bit of a coach just from talking with you a little bit. I imagine that's how the approach that you take. How do you determine if somebody is or isn't ready to get off the bench when we're talking about business?
Yeah. I think you see a spark in them or something in them that they don't see in themselves. I have a sales person who's just been amazing here, and I like to tell this story. He applied for a customer success manager job. I could see in his interview and just his polish and his approach and his ability to have the conversation and communicate, and then his background, that he would be amazing in sales. He didn't see it for himself because he didn't feel like a salesperson. He didn't have that level of confidence yet. However, telling him I had that confidence and allowing him the opportunity to get in that game and prove to himself that he had that confidence and build it, but also kind of just putting him in the game allowed him to build that. And he's now our director of sales. I think in addition, when you see insecurities in people, but you see high performance out of people and you see that they have higher competencies than they give themselves, a lot of times this is because they didn't get a bachelor's degree, right? But they've got a lot of experience and they've let someone tell them that they're not qualified for a role because they didn't get a bachelor's degree, right? Or they got a bachelor's degree in music and they're trying to do something over here. Some of the best accounting bookkeepers that I've had inside of organizations have not been the staff accountants that graduated from a 4-year institution and who went to the CPA firm for 2 years. Some of them they've been working in every small business, keeping the books and doing the thing, and they've kept themselves at a very low salary because that's all they think they deserve, but their competency has moved to up here without that degree. So I think it's a combination, but it's really about stretching that. It's about calling on people in leadership related settings. It's about putting people in design review meetings who have never worked on product, but they are product experts in that specific role and letting them have input and exposure to engineers. It's full faceted. We bring people into carrier partnership meetings who currently aren't, outward facing, and help them build their confidence of presenting themselves on the call and participating, and then saying, I like to call on people, but not to put them on the spot, but to make sure they contribute, right? Sure. Or what do you think about that? Or if I see that I've invited people to get in the game and they're still sitting on the bench, they're not getting in the game, I'll just stop and require them to participate a little, but just with a nudge rather than embarrass anyone. I'll lean into where I think they have a contribution and then leave it as an open. What do you think about if we added this here? Because I see that we have this problem here, and then I let them go on. So just nudging that participation, I think, is really important, and getting the passion and starting to see where people have strengths. I've had a lot of people that are in roles and they have desires to be 5 levels higher in that same discipline. Mm-hmm. And you see all of this excitement out of them, out of a completely different area, and they don't see it in themselves. So just talking to them about it, like, I see you light up, I see you drop all the other balls and focus on this thing when we have something like this. So just doing those types of things, sort of like what Jessica did for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's so funny that you bring that up when somebody's like so excited about something in a different discipline or,
Yeah.
you know, they're, oh, 5 levels up over here. I was speaking and it's just been within the last 2 or 3 weeks on this show. And one of the guests I was speaking with, he said, yeah, we had a guy that was, you know, a tech in a hospital. I think he was a tech or doing more technical items. And he says, but he always lit up. He says, well, what do you really want to do? Because this guy wasn't doing a good job or whatnot. And he says, well, I really want to do woodworking. So they moved him into like this woodworking section of the hospital. I was like, I wouldn't even know there was a woodworking section of the hospital. He goes, oh, there's stuff that we got to do. And he says, then the guy flourished, you know, and it's so crazy that so much of that can come when it comes to leadership just through having conversations. Like you have to be willing to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Brandy, it, have you ever put somebody in a situation because you saw more in them, or maybe for yourself, where you're saying, because we said, hey, we got to pull people off the bench, we got to get them in the game, we got to get them moving.
Yep.
Has there been a time where we pulled them off the bench, we got them in the game, and then they absolutely flopped? And how do you handle that?
Yeah, I've done that with a couple of bad hires. Few people that were unemployed but had a skill set that I thought was transferable, give them an opportunity in a new company, in a role, and they just didn't, regardless of the coaching, regardless of the feedback, regardless of the opportunity, they wanted to remain on the bench, not participating, with poor body language and bad attitudes, right? So kind of, it doesn't matter with the best coach. Sometimes people aren't the right fit for a team. I think one of my weaknesses as a leader is investing too much time in those scenarios. I try different ways. I mean, we said different ways motivate different people.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried sometimes, changing leaders, even, giving someone an opportunity in a different way. And I've found that sometimes people are their own worst enemy, and it gets worse if they've been doing it for a long time.
For sure.
And in each of these scenarios, but I've had it work. People were unemployed. They were later in their career. They kind of pigeonholed themselves into one type of role. And that role is pretty much eliminated in a lot of organizations because of technologies and various things. So I felt really excited about offering that opportunity, but some people are really tough for feedback or change after a long life of doing something one way. Now, alternative to that, one of our directors or one of our employees here, he was one of our first hires, and he alternatively was, let go during COVID because he's later in his career. And he really understood that at that very end, that you're probably not going to get that 6-figure job over the 40 something or the 30 something. And he'd always wanted to be a part of a startup. And I said, yeah, let's go. And so that did work. So I was leaning on that in those other scenarios, but it's bit me 3 times in a row. And I try to be so open-minded about having diverse skill sets on a team can add to the best outcome, but sometimes it doesn't always ring true. And I give long windows of time for ump-ramp, and I probably need to learn that a little quicker.
Well, that's fair. I think for people that are really good leaders, most all of us in that in that leadership space are often empathetic. We want people to succeed. Nobody that is a good leader wants to bring someone in and not see them succeed, or see them fail.
Right.
And so I think that it's one of those things when you're saying, hey, I'm guilty of doing this. I mean, ultimately, I think a lot of people are. And I think for anybody listening, and you just got to hear it, if you set somebody up and they are not the right fit or they are failing at the role, I think you've got, what I'm hearing you say and kind of reading between the lines here, it's the 3 T's, as I've heard it called in business. You can either train them and move them into another role. If they're not wanting to train them, then you can either transfer them, right? Transfer them into a role that might fit their skill sets. And if they're not wanting to be trained or transferred, your only third alternative is terminate, right? You got to terminate the business relationship. And you can do that with good conscience. And that's one of the hardest things. That's one of the things that nobody wants to talk about is like, hey, I hired this person. I think part of the reason is when we as leaders Brandy, and you might or might not agree with this. Hey, I'm going to bring somebody on board. They're the right fit. Hey, yeah, they were unemployed, but they had the skill set and they've got all the stuff and they've got the mindset and they've got all the sparkles, right? And we go,
Yeah.
that I can make this fit. One of the things is that if it doesn't fit, and folks listening, you need to hear this. It's okay to make the decision if you've got to cut ties with that person. The hard thing is then that you have to realize and you have to admit that, hey, I probably made a mistake.
Yep. Yep.
So
You have to get up there, be vulnerable to your team and say, I missed the mark on that one. But one thing that I've seen is if you leave that linger too long, it can build resentment in team. If someone's not performing and you're not addressing the issue as a leader, because that's the place where I think defines real leaders. Is it's easy if you have a shiny toy that's doing a great job to promote them up to the better role. It's really hard to get the best out of people and then to admit when you have to quit, because great leaders they're not quitters. So that piece right there and doing it at the right balance without disrupting team is probably, I think, the nuance that people get wrong sometimes.
Absolutely. So as we're coming to the tail end here, a couple of reminders for the audience. If you are interested or your broker is interested in getting more information on benefits and health insurance, you can check out benefitbay.com. That's benefitbay.com. Spelling contest for that one for me. Also, you can connect with Brandy on LinkedIn. You could shoot her an email to brandy.burch@benefitbay.com as well. And Brandy, thank you for joining me today. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share as we take us out from the Leadership Toolkit today?
No, I'd say a closing quote, clear is kind, right? I like Brene Brown's clear is kind. So back to our direct feedback, I think that would be my closing quote for us.
I love that. So keep that in mind and write it down, folks. Clear is kind. And if you would hang out for just a minute, Brandy, and I'll go ahead and take us out, okay?
Yeah.
Folks, that's going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit with my new friend, Brandy Burch. What a great conversation. And this is one of those things, she's in a space that it is hard to understand. It's hard to navigate. And we spent some time at the beginning talking about, questions you can ask, ways that you can engage. I highly encourage, connect with Brandy. Go to benefitbay.com, check out the website, connect with her on LinkedIn. And then as we moved on, I love a lot of the items that she shared as she was coming up and navigating through business and the things that leaders should be doing, and closing out here with clear is kind. Absolutely perfect. Do me a favor, everybody. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Throw some thumbs up. That one of the ways that this podcast continues to grow is, obviously we need likes and subscribes and that sort of deal. Most importantly, share this with somebody that could benefit from it. I think that's one of those things. We have these conversations with people that are business owners and leaders in their own right in all these different verticals. And one of the best things you can do to serve somebody and really help them grow is share an episode with someone so that it allows them to grow, and it'll allow the people around them to grow, and it allows you to put you in a place of being that confident friend, that confident coach and leader with them. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to tune in and join me today on the Leadership Toolkit. Until we speak next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everybody.